Masechet Bava Kama Daf Pe Zayin. The Mishnah mentioned the law Mevayeshet HaSoma, someone who causes humiliation to a blind person, does have to pay compensation. A blind person can feel humiliation and deserves to receive payment. Matnitin de lo Rabbi Yehuda. The Gemara notes that our Mishnah is evidently not the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer Soma en lo boshit, because in the Baraita Rabbi Yehuda teaches that a blind person does not have liability for humiliation. Seems both ways. He will not receive money if he's humiliated, and he will not have to pay if he humiliates others. And through this conduit, Rabbi Yehuda also ruled that a blind person will not receive punishments of going into exile for killing a person by mistake, or lashes, or capital punishment by a court. A blind person that does anything that would require this does not get such punishments. That's the end of the Baita. Let's explain. What's the source? Gamad anecha me'adim zomamin. Ma'atam somin la afacha somin la. So what's the connection between embarrassment and these other punishments? It's from this verse, lo tahos anecha. Regarding embarrassment, we learned the laws of embarrassment from the two men fighting and the woman who grabs the privates of one of the men. So, kasotat kapa, lo tahos enecha, do not have pity. So here we learn that one is liable. We don't take this literally cutting off the hand, but rather has to pay for the embarrassment that she caused. That same phrase comes up with edim zomamin, where you have to do to the edim what they sought to do. Lo tahos enecha, nefesh b'nefesh ayin ba'ayin, and so on. And here also it says, do not show pity. We're using the same phrase. So just as a blind person is not involved in the laws of testimony because he cannot see, he cannund testify about things, and therefore is not involved in the law of edim zomamin, so too, regarding the laws of embarrassment, also, they do not apply to a blind person. So that's how we learned the first law, that a blind person does not have embarrassment. And now, where does we learn the second law? Mechayeve galuyot etanya belo reot perat lesoma deber biyuda. V'meir omer lerabot et hasuma. That a blind person who kills by mistake does not go into exile, because the pasuk says if he kills someone without seeing him. This is a pasuk in Sefer B'Midbar. If someone inadvertently drops a stone on someone else and kills him belo reot, without seeing him. That's the pasuk we just quoted. So that means that it's potential that he could see him, right? So it's talking about someone with sight who doesn't look around when he's working and ends up dropping something. So he should have looked around and been more aware of his surroundings, because he did not. So he is liable to go into exile to Ir Miklat. But if someone who's blind, he couldn't possibly look around and see. Therefore, he does not go to Ir Miklat. That's the derivation of Rabbi Yehuda. However, Rabbi Meir uses the same phrase, belo reot, without looking, to include a blind person. Now, it doesn't matter whether sighted or not sighted. The fact that he did not see that other person there, so he is liable. So this is interesting that they both use the same exact word for opposite conclusions. So let's clarify how they do that. So now we're quoting down the pasuk in Sefer Devarim, also about inadvertent killer. And so there, pasuk says, if he comes to his friend in the forest and he's coming to cut down wood. So it says El Eliyahu, he comes, and it doesn't matter who comes, even a blind person who comes into the forest and kills someone inadvertently would be liable. So Katab Rachamana belo reot le'ma'uteh. Since the pasuk in Devarim is inclusive of everyone, so the pasuk in B'Midbar that says, and he doesn't see, means he could see, so that limits the law to a seeing person, and that's a Yehuda's source, that a blind person does not go to Ir Miklat. Rabbi Meir, katav rachamana belo reot le'ma'uteh, uchtav rachamana bebli da'at le'ma'uteh. Have mi'ut achar mi'ut, ve'en mi'ut achar mi'ut, ela le'rabot. Rabbi Meir says, yes, the pasuk in B'Midbar says, and he doesn't see. And that's the limiting word, so that, fine, that will limit a blind person. But the pasuk in Devarim also says, without knowledge, which is also a limiting phrase. So now we have two limiting phrases. This works like a double negative, which ends up being a positive. So these two limitations end up adding something. Adding who? Adding a blind person who kills by mistake does in fact go into exile. Rabbi Yehuda, what's he going to do with that phrase, biblidat? He used it for something else, that in order to deserve exile into Ir Miklat, you do have to intend to kill someone. It's just that I killed the wrong person. I intend to kill Mr. A, I ended up killing Mr. B. That's the case when I go into exile because I did have some intention to kill one person, which was the wrong person. Whereas if I did not have intention to kill anyone at all, then you do not go into Ir Miklat. That's Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Now, Rabbi Yehuda further said that a blind person does not get capital punishment. How does he know that? This is the word roseach regarding someone who kills inadvertently and goes into exile, and this is the word roseach by a murderer who kills on purpose. And so just like a blind person does not go into exile, so too they do not get capital punishment for murder. Now how do you know that a blind person does not get punished with lashes? It says the word rasha regarding lashes and also regarding capital punishment, and so we make it gezer hashava. That's all one version of the Rabbi Yehuda's statement where he said that a blind person, number one, is not involved in humiliation and also does not get these three punishments. But here's another version that expands the exemption for blind people even more. Rabbi Yehuda thinks that a blind person does not have humiliation, and Rabbi Yehuda also thinks that blind person is exempt from all civil laws in the Torah. Not only the three categories, but even other civil laws. What does the says that the congregation will judge between someone who kills someone else and Goel Hadam, the avenger of the blood. And then, so that's talking about killing inadvertently, and then they connects it with all of these laws, civil laws. So anyone who is involved, for whom the laws of killing inadvertently and going to Ir Miklat to be safe from Goel Hadam is whoever those laws apply to, the other civil laws also apply to them. But if not, and a blind person, those laws of killing inadvertently do not apply to them. Also, laws of civil laws do not apply to him. That's the second version of the Rabbi Yehuda. And now a third version of the Rabbi Yehuda that expands the exemption of blind people even more. Tanya idach Rabbi Yehuda omer soma en lo boshet v'chen haya Rabbi Yehuda potro mikol misvot amorot bat Torah. Amar Rav Shisha bered Rav Idi mai tamad Rabbi Yehuda amar kera ve'ela misvot v'chukim mishpatim kol she'yeshno mishpatim yeshno b'misvot u'v'chukim kol she'eno b'mishpatim eno b'misvot v'chukim. Rabbi Yehuda says a blind person is not, the laws of embarrassment do not apply to him. And Rabbi Yehuda also would exempt a blind person from all the misvot of the Torah, not only civil laws, but all laws. What's the source? Rav Shisha, the son of Rav Idi, explains that Pasuk in Devarim says these are the mitzvot and chukim and mishpatim. So it's connecting general mitzvot and chukim, ritual laws with civil laws. So if anyone for whom civil laws applies, they also other mitzvot can apply to them. But for anyone where civil laws do not apply, and we already saw the source for that blind people, civil laws do not apply to them, also all other laws do not apply to them. Presumably, the commentators go through what laws do or don't, no laws apply at all. So some say, this is only talking about misvat aseh. A blind person can't just go and kill people. He's not allowed to. Even though he wouldn't get capital punishment for it, he still has prohibitions. And we're talking about positive commandments that he does not have to do. Okay, Amar Rav Yosef, Meresh Avamina Mand de Amar Halacha Rabbi Yehuda, de Amar Soma Patu Min HaMisvot Ka'avdina Yomat Tabal Rabbanan Mai Tamad La Mepaktin Dina Abdina Misvot. Rav Yosef, who himself was blind, said, at first I used to think that anyone who would tell me that the halakha is like Rabbi Yehuda, that a blind person does not have to do misvot, I would make a party for the sages, because I'll be so happy because I am not commanded because I'm blind, and yet I perform mitzvot anyway. Of course, he's a great rabbi, and so he gets extra credit for doing mitzvot, even though he doesn't have to do them. That's what he thought at first. However, Vashta Dishma'it Deha לרבי חנינא דאמר רבי חנינא גדול מסובב ועושה ממי שאינו מסובב ועושה. מאן דאמר לי אין הלכה כרבי יהודה עבדין יומת רבנן מאי תמא דכי מפקדינא eat li agra tefeh. But now that I learned the teaching of Rabbi Chanina, who said, greater is someone who's commanded and performs a mitzvah than someone who is not commanded. It seems counterintuitive, right? If you do it for extra credit, it should be, and you don't even have to, it should be greater. Rabbi Chanina says, no, human psychology is actually not so. People are happy to volunteer, but when you have to do something, right? Like you have to, if you're reading a book for fun, you have to read it. But if you're assigned the book for school, then you say, oh, now I don't want to do it. If you have to, once you have to, then yes, Sarah says, oh, you want to try to get out of it. So someone who's commanded and therefore responsible, he can't just decide one day I'll do it, one day I'll not, responsible to do it all the time. So that person who is doing it regularly and absolutely because he's commanded, it actually has greater reward than someone who is doing it just because he feels like it voluntarily. It's hard to rely on a volunteer. If you really need something done, you want to make sure that it's someone who has a responsibility to have to do it. So Rabbi Chanina says, greater is a person who's commanded. So now, Rav Yosef says, someone who tells me halacha is not like Rabbi Yehuda, I would make a party for them. Why? Because I want to be commanded. And if I am commanded, even as a blind person, then I get more reward. So I'd rather be commanded than not commanded. Okay, next Mishnah says, Zeh chomer ba'adam mibeshor she'adam mishalem nezek sa'a ripui shevet ubosh misham demeh veladot veshor eno misham ela nezek upatur midemeh veladot. The law regarding a human being who causes damage is more stringent than an ox who causes damage, because a human being who causes damage to another human being has to pay all 5 payments for the injury itself, for the pain, for the medical cost, loss of livelihood and embarrassment. And also, the human being that causes a miscarriage has to pay for the miscarriage. However, an ox that causes damage only has to pay for damage, not the other 4. And if an ox causes a miscarriage, the owner does not have to pay. Someone who hits his father or mother, but without making a bruise that bleeds. So if he would cause them to bleed, then he would be liable capital punishment and would not have to pay, because you don't get 2 punishments. But if he hits them in such a way that does not cause them to have a bruise, then he has to pay whatever 5 of the 5 are applicable. Now, someone who hits his friend on Yom Kippur has to pay everything, because Yom Kippur is not capital punishment. We'll see the Mishnah will contrast this with Shabbat, where Shabbat he gets capital punishment for causing someone a bruise, and so it doesn't pay. But Yom Kippur, since it's not capital punishment, it's only karet, you could get karet and also have to pay. Someone who injures an eved ivri has to pay all 5 things, except for shevet, except for loss of livelihood if it's his own slave. So someone who causes an injury to his own eved ivri, now it's true he can't work now. But who's he going to pay? The owner is the one losing out, so he'll just pay himself, so he doesn't have to pay. But the other things, he has to pay to the Eved. If someone causes an injury to an Eved Kana'ani, who is owned by somebody else, he has to pay all of the damages. All 5 damages, still as a human being. And the Biuta says, no, Vadim do not have experience, or do not get paid for humiliation, because they're already low-class slaves, so they don't get that payment. For a deaf mute and someone not mentally competent and a minor, it's not good to have an encounter with them, because you're always going to lose out. If you injure one of them, you have to pay. They're a human being, so you have to pay. But if they cause damage to someone else, since they're not mentally competent, we cannot hold them responsible, so they don't have to pay. You have to pay them if you cause them injury, but they don't have to pay you if they cause you injury. And similarly, a slave and a married woman, any encounter with them also is going to be a disadvantage to yourself, because similarly, if you cause them damage, you have to pay all 5 things, but if they cause damage, they do not have to pay. Eved doesn't have his own money, and Isha also does not generally have her own money, It's whatever she has is owned by her husband and the Eved by his master. So he's not going to get paid. However, these two are different from the first three in the previous paragraph. However, since they do have da'at, they are responsible, they just don't have access to money. Therefore, they will eventually have to pay once they do get their own money. So if the woman is divorced and then now she gets her ketuvah payout, she gets whatever money she brought into the marriage, so then she will have to pay at that point, or an Eved, once he gets free and now he has his own money, so he also then has to pay. Which is not true of Cheresh Shoteh Katan, because they're just not responsible at all for their actions. They are not liable to pay in the first place, whereas Eved and Isha are liable, but they just don't have access to money, but they will have to pay eventually. Someone who hits his father or mother and causes them a bruise and causes them to bleed, so he does not have to pay for their injury because he's liable to capital punishment. And similarly, if someone causes damage to someone else on Shabbat, he injures a person on Shabbat, he does not have to pay because he gets capital punishment. If someone injures his own Abed Kena'ani, he doesn't have to pay anything because it's his property, it's his ownership. Only if someone else damages someone's Abed Kena'ani, he has to pay the master, but here he is the master, so he does not have to pay. Rabbi Elazar asked Rav, if someone causes an injury to a minor daughter of someone else, he obviously has to pay for the damage, but who gets the money? The father or the minor daughter? On the one hand, you can argue that since the Torah gives the profits of her youth to the father, the profits of her youth, that's referring, number one, to Kiddushin, Kesef Kiddushin. If a man betroths her, then he, as long as she's a minor, he gives the money to the father. Also, in the case of rape or seduction, the perpetrator gives the money to the father. So since the father has the right to the money of her youth, so too for injury, the father should get it. Why? What's the connection between giving money of Kiddushin and injury? Because now she is going to be worth less. She's her bride price is going to be less now that she has this injury. And therefore, the father is the one losing out on that money, so he deserves to get, just like he gets the bride price, so too, he should get the money of the injury. On the other hand, we can argue that the Torah only gives her that money of her betrothal, because if he wants to betroth his daughter to a person afflicted with boils, he can. In other words, father has full control over who his minor daughter will marry, even if it's someone that's really horrible. He can do that. Not that he would want to do that, but he has a legal right. However, in terms of injury, if the father decides that he wants to cause an injury to his daughter, he's not allowed to. He does not have that right, and therefore, the Torah does not grant him the right to receive money of injury. They're two separate things altogether, and so therefore the minor daughter should get the money. That's the two sides of the argument, and that's what Rabbi Elazar asked Rav. He answers, Rav answers, no, the Torah only grants the father money of betrothal, but not anything else. No, so sorry, the father does not get the injury. Okay, so Rabbi Elazar asked the question, and Rav gave an answer, but Rabbi Elazar is not happy with the answer and begins to challenge Rav of Rav's own answer. It seems that Rabbi Elazar did have his own answer and was maybe challenging Rav or wasn't sure about it, and so asks him from the following Mishnah, in our Mishnah taught that someone who caused an injury to an Eved Ivri, he has to pay everything except for the loss of livelihood. If it's his own Eved Ivri, then he doesn't have to pay because he's the boss, so he's going to pay himself. So he just caused his own loss of livelihood from the slave, but all the other things go to the slave. So the same law should apply to the daughter, since if a daughter works, the earnings go to the father. Therefore, the shevet, the loss of livelihood, should go to the father. So Rav, how come you said that the father only gets the money of betrothal, but all the other 5 payments go to the daughter? The father should get the loss of livelihood. Clarifies, and indeed, Rav would agree with that. That the father gets the loss of livelihood because anything that the daughter earns until she becomes an adult, the father gets. So, okay, good. So Rav, we're clarifying the daughter gets the other 4 payments, but you're right, loss of livelihood would go to the father. Rabbi Elazar further challenges Rav, Itibeh, HaChover b'ibno hagadol yiten lo miyad, b'ibno katan yaseh lo segula, HaChover b'beito ketana patur. We have a braita. We're going to see a second braita. So we're going to call this braita number 1. Someone who caused injury to his adult son, he has to pay him right away. If he causes injury to his minor son, he has to put an investment, a sigula, something special, something that will be expensive, worth more money, and will increase in value, so that when the child grows up, then he'll be able to take that. And in the meantime, he'll gain from that investment. If a father causes injury to his minor daughter, he does not have to pay at all. And not only that, if other people, someone else caused an injury to a person's minor daughter, then he has to pay the father. So here it says pays the father, and Rav said that no, the father only gets money of betrothal. So how are you going to answer that? The answer is hachename be'shevet. When this baraita says that the person who injures someone else's minor daughter has to pay the father, that's only talking about loss of livelihood, which I would agree with. But all the other payments go to the daughter. Okay, we know gadol yiten lo miyad. Now, in that baraita it says that for an injury to one adult son, he has to pay right away. Is that true? Here's the second braita. Urminhu, hachavar banav b'notav shel acherim gedolim yiten lehem miyad. Ketanim yasem lehem sigula, be'banav b'notav shelo patur. The second braita says if someone causes injury to the sons and daughters of someone else, so it depends. If they are adults, then the injurer has to pay them, those people, immediately. If they are minors, then the person who caused injury has to make an investment on behalf of that minor, and when the minor grows up, we'll be able to take that investment that went up, hopefully. Now, if a person this is the main point, if a person causes injury to his own sons and daughters, he does not have to pay. So, how could it be that up here, we said that in a person who causes injury to his adult son, he has to pay right away. But here, it says if he causes an injury to his son or daughter, then he does not have to pay. This is a contradiction between these two baraitot. Depends if these adult children are still dependent on the father. They're still living in the father's house, eating at his table. They're financially dependent on him. So then, if they are financially dependent and the father caused an injury, he does not have to pay, because he's paying for everything for them. But if they are financially independent, that was the first baraita that said, then the father has to pay them immediately. Now let's clarify both of these things. The first one, we decided is b'shen semuchim al shulchano, when they are independent, and that's why the father has to pay for damage he did to his adult children. Now, then, let's read the continuation of that baraita. If in fact it's talking about a child who's independent financially, then the continuation that says a person who causes injury to his minor daughter does not have to pay, and not only that, someone else who causes her injury has to pay the father. So this doesn't make sense, because the money should be given to the minor daughter, because she has to provide for her own sustenance. What we just said is talking about someone who's financially independent of the father. So why should the father not have to pay and get the money? The money should go to the daughter. And we're going to increase the question by comparing the daughter to an eved. even according to the opinion. There is one opinion that says a master can tell his slave, I want you to work for me, and I'm not giving you food. But he can only do that, even according to that opinion, if it's Eved Kana'ani. Because he could tell him, I want you to work for me all day, and then go out and beg for food at night. So, Eved Kana'ani, maybe, according to that one opinion, a master doesn't have to give him food. But for an Eved Ivri, the master has to pay, because it says that is good with him if he wants to stay. It says, I like living with you. It means that the master has to provide food and drink for his Eved Ivri. If my master has to pay for food for his Eved Ivri, all the more so for his own daughter, and so therefore it doesn't make sense that the father should not have to pay the daughter, or that someone who injures a minor daughter should give the money to the father. The money should go to the daughter, because the father is responsible for providing for his daughter. Oh, we can use an answer that Rava, son of Rabullah, said in a different context. We'll apply it here also, that we're talking about the surplus. Certainly, the base amount of what she needs to eat, right? How much is her food per day? $20 a day. Okay, that amount is going to go to her. But if the payment here is more than that, well, then the father can keep it. So that's what the Baraita was talking about. Okay, so explain the first Baraita. Now the second one. The second Baraita, how do we explain it? That's where these adult children are dependent on the father, so that's why the father doesn't have to pay if he injures them. If so, in the continuation of the Baraita, it says that if someone else causes injury to someone's adult sons, he has to pay right away. And if it's a minor, then the injurer has to put it into an investment. But why? Since they're dependent on the father's household, they should have to pay the father. We explain that a father is particular about money if it's money that he's going to have to pay out. Since these kids are dependent on him, he caused them an injury, and he doesn't want to have to pay any money out of his pocket to give to them. After all, they're dependent on his table, and therefore he doesn't have to pay. However, if it's new money coming in from elsewhere, someone else caused injury to his son, so he doesn't need to keep that money. He's like, you know what, give it to my son, who's an adult, or put an investment for the minor son, even though technically he would have a right to take it, because the kids are dependent on him. He doesn't mind that the money go to the son. Hold on. Another law in general is that if a child finds an item, finds a wallet in the street, so it goes to the father. Now, this is new money coming in, yet we assume that a father is particular and says, I want, that's mine. There's actually two distinctions. If it's new money coming in and there's no harm to the child, because the child there was no injury, it just found something, then the father says, give that to me. You're dependent on me, you found something, so I get to keep it. But in the case of injury where it's new money coming in and there was injury to the child, the child suffered a pain, so then the father says, I don't want to benefit monetarily from the pain that my child had, so there he's fine to let the child just keep the money. We now challenge this distinction from the first Baraita, that in the first Baraita there is injury to the daughter, and the money is new money coming in from outside, and yet here the father is particular and wants the money himself, as it says, right? Not only even if it's other people that cause damage to her, they have to give it to the father. So this is curious because based on what we just said here, it seems that the father does not care and would be willing to let the daughter have the money because it's new money coming in, and what kind of father is going to want to benefit monetarily from suffering that happened to their child? And the answer is Amre hatam de gabra kaptanahu deha en samuchin al shulchano afilu b'midi date lehu me'alma kaped. The two baratot I'm talking about two different types of people. That Baraita is talking about a person who is very particular. Look, after all, he doesn't take care of his children. They don't eat at his table. And so, if that kind of father, even new money that's coming in from elsewhere, he is particular to say, yes, I want it. If it's coming to me, I'm going to take it. Whereas, this Baraita, he is not particular. You see, he had his children are dependent on him. He takes care of them. If he has to take out money from his pocket, then he's going to be particular, and he says, "Why should I don't want to have to pay if I don't have to." So even this kind of person will not want to shell out money. But if it's new money coming in, they will not be particular and say, you know what, don't pay me, just give the money to the child. We mentioned before that if injury happens to a minor, so that one should put something into an investment. So what does that mean? What's a good investment? One opinion is Sefer Torah is always going to have a lot of value, and the other is a date palm, because then you have a tree and it grows and it produces dates, so that you have something that keeps on producing. This discussion that we had above among the rabbis of Bavel, Rav in particular, also in Eretz Yisrael, Shakish reports that there are two opinions. That we report that in Eretz Yisrael there are also two opinions. Resh Lakish says that the Torah only gave to the father the rights for the kesef kiddushin and the bride price, but that's all. And so that's the same as the opinion of Rav, that the amount of damages goes to a father if someone injures the minor daughter. However, Rabbi Yochanan says, even if it's just a wound, the father receives it. The father does in fact receive everything. Now, we ask, do you think really just for a wound, the money would go to the father? Even the Elazar above, who disagreed with Rav, that was only regarding Chabala, an injury, that was the two sides of his question. Well, maybe an injury, she will get less of a bride price because of this injury, and so the father is losing out. So that was the side to say that the father deserves that payment for injury. But even the Elazar would not even bring up as part of a question that for just a wound where her value is not diminished, that the father would get that money. No one would say that. So Rabbi Yochanan is not parallel to, certainly not to Rav, but not even to Rabbi Elazar, right? Can it be that Rabbi Yochanan really thinks that even for a wound that has nothing to do with her monetary value, the father would get the money? Amar Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina shepesa'ah befaneha ve'afhataha mikaspaha. Rabbi Yosef bar Chanina explains that the wound is on her face, and so it does lower monetary value, even though it's not something that will diminish from her ability to work or anything like that. Nevertheless, it will diminish from her beauty, so that the bride price will be less and the father will lose out because of that. So that's why if it's talking about something that's noticeable like that, then that is the way Rabbi Yochanan said that the father deserves to take that monetary payment. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen ve'amen.